It was a warm Saturday afternoon in suburban Charlotte, North Carolina, and the local park buzzed with life. Kids darted across the playground, parents chatted on benches, and the hum of cicadas filled the air. Near the edge of the park, by a shaded picnic table, stood Maya Jackson, a 15-year-old girl with curly black hair pulled into a loose bun. She wore a faded blue tank top, denim shorts, and old sneakers, her phone propped up on the table as she strummed a beat on its surface with her fingers. Maya loved music, and today she was working on a rhythm for her school's talent show, tapping out a tune while waiting for her friend Chloe. The piece didn't last long. Across the park, a woman's voice cut through the chatter, sharp and loud. "Hey, you! Stop that racket right now." Susan Miller, a 38-year-old woman with neatly styled blonde hair, marched toward Maya, her arms crossed tightly over her crisp white blouse. She carried a reusable coffee mug in one hand, her lips pursed in a thin line of disapproval. Susan lived in a house bordering the park and had been sipping coffee on her porch when Maya's tapping caught her ear. To her, it wasn't just a teenager messing around. It was a disturbance she wouldn't tolerate. Maya looked up, her fingers pausing mid-beat. "Sorry, ma'am," she said, her voice soft but steady. "I didn't think it was that loud." Susan stopped a few feet away, her eyes narrowing. "Didn't think? You kids never think. This is a public park, not your personal music studio." She pointed at Maya's phone. "Turn that off, or I'm calling the cops." Maya frowned, confused but calm. "It's just my fingers on the table," she said. "I'm not even playing anything out loud." She picked up her phone, showing the blank screen. Susan's face flushed red. "Don't talk back to me," she snapped. "I've had enough of you kids making noise around here." Without waiting for a reply, she pulled her own phone from her pocket and dialed. "Hello, police. There's a teenager causing a disturbance in the park by my house. She's being rude and won't stop. Send someone now." Within minutes, the wail of sirens pierced the afternoon calm. A patrol car rolled up to the park's edge, its lights flashing red and blue. Two officers stepped out, their faces stern as they approached. Maya stood frozen by the picnic table, her heart pounding, her hands gripping her phone. Around her, a small crowd gathered, parents pausing their conversations, kids peering from the swings, whispering and watching. The officer stopped in front of her. "What's going on here, miss?" one asked, his tone even but firm. Maya swallowed hard. "I was just tapping a beat," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "I didn't mean to bother anyone." Before she could explain further, Susan strode over, her coffee mug still in hand. "That's her," she said, pointing at Maya. "She's been disrupting the whole park. I told her to stop, but she got smart with me. Kids like her don't belong here making trouble." The officers exchanged a quick look, their expressions neutral. "Is that true?" one asked Maya. She shook her head. "No, sir. I just said it wasn't loud. I wasn't trying to be rude." Susan folded her arms, her voice rising. "I don't care what she says. She's a nuisance, and I want her gone." Maya took a deep breath, her dark eyes darting to the crowd, then back to the officers. She was used to being overlooked, a girl from a modest family in a mostly white suburb. But today, she refused to let this woman win. Little did Susan know, Maya wasn't as alone as she seemed. Maya Jackson had lived in Charlotte, North Carolina, for just over a year. She and her dad moved into a modest two-bedroom house on the edge of this suburban neighborhood after he took a new job. At 15, Maya was a quiet girl with a sharp mind and a love for music that ran deep. She spent hours in her room, tapping out beats on her desk or strumming chords on an old guitar her dad had bought her from a thrift store. At school, she was a solid student, always on time for class, and she'd signed up for the talent show to perform an original beat she'd been perfecting. Maya wasn't loud or flashy. She preferred blending in, but her dark eyes sparkled when she talked about rhythms and melodies. That Saturday, she'd come to the park near their house to practice. It was a sunny spot with picnic tables and plenty of space, perfect for meeting her friend Chloe, who promised to help with the choreography. Maya didn't have fancy equipment, just her phone to record ideas and her fingers to drum out the tune. She'd been tapping away, lost in the beat, when Susan Miller's voice shattered her focus. What Susan didn't know, what no one in the park could have guessed, was who Maya's father was. Daniel Jackson, 48, was a U.S. Senator representing North Carolina, a man known across the state for his steady voice and tireless work on education and housing reform. Tall and broad-shouldered with graying hair and a calm demeanor, Daniel had spent years climbing the political ladder, from city council to the Senate. His deep brown eyes carried the weight of experience, and his presence could quiet a room without a word. He'd raised Maya alone since her mom passed away when she was 7, balancing late-night votes in Washington with school pickups and bedtime stories. Daniel wasn't the kind of dad who flaunted his title. At home, he was just Dad. The guy who burned toast on weekends and laughed at Maya's terrible puns. But his job kept him busy, often pulling him away for days at a time. That morning, he'd been in Charlotte for a rare weekend off, planning to join Maya at the park later. They'd made a deal over breakfast at their small kitchen table, surrounded by stacks of his paperwork and her sheet music. "No meetings today, kiddo," Daniel had said, spreading jam on a slightly charred slice of bread. "I'm all yours. Park, then maybe ice cream?" Maya grinned, pushing her cereal bowl aside. "Only if you don't make me listen to your old jazz records again." "Deal," he said, chuckling. "You bring the beats. I'll bring the snacks." She'd hugged him before heading out, her phone and a bottle of water tucked into her backpack. Daniel promised to meet her after finishing a quick call with his staff. He'd been looking forward to a normal day. No suits, no speeches, just him and his daughter. Back at the park, Maya stood by the picnic table, her fingers still as Susan's accusations rang in her ears. She didn't know Susan lived in the house across the street. Didn't know the woman had been watching her from the porch, her coffee mug in hand, her patience thinning with every tap. To Susan, Maya wasn't a teenager practicing for a school event. She was an intruder, a disruption in her orderly world. Maya had faced sideways glances before in this neighborhood, where most families had bigger houses and whiter skin. She'd learned to shrug them off, thanks to her dad's advice. "Keep your head up, Maya. You belong anywhere you choose to be." But now, with sirens wailing and officers closing in, she wondered if he'd been wrong. She just didn't know he was already on his way. The warm Charlotte sun beat down on the park as Maya Jackson stood by the picnic table, her cracked phone in one hand and her sketchbook in the other. The 2 police officers loomed nearby, their dark uniforms stark against the green grass. Susan Miller's voice still echoed in the air, sharp and unrelenting. "She's been making a racket all day," Susan said, her arms folded tightly across her white blouse. "I told her to stop, but she thinks she can do whatever she wants." Maya's chest tightened. She glanced at the officers, then back at Susan. "I was just tapping a beat," she said, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. "It's for school. I didn't mean to bother anyone." The taller officer, a man with a buzz cut and a notepad, raised an eyebrow. "Tapping a beat?" he asked, his tone skeptical. Why didn't you keep it at home? Maya blinked, caught off guard. I was waiting for my friend, she said. The park's public. I didn't think it was a problem. Susan stepped forward, her coffee mug swinging in her hand. Public doesn't mean you own it, she snapped. You don't get to come here and disturb everyone. I've lived by this park for 10 years, and I'm tired of kids like you thinking they can take over. The words hit Maya like a slap. Kids like you. She knew what Susan meant. Her brown skin, her faded clothes, the way she didn't fit the mold of the neatly trimmed lawns and shiny SUVs around here. She'd heard whispers at school, seen the stares when she walked home, but this was louder, bolder. The second officer, shorter with a mustache, scribbled something in his notebook. Did you tell her to stop? He asked Susan. Of course I did, Susan said, her voice rising. She got smart with me, said it wasn't loud. Can you believe that? I don't feel safe with her hanging around here. Maya's eyes widened. Safe? She said, almost to herself. I wasn't doing anything wrong. Susan turned to her, her blue eyes blazing. Oh, please. It starts with noise, then it's loitering, then who knows what. I've seen it before. Kids like you don't respect boundaries. The taller officer held up a hand. Let's calm down, he said, though his gaze lingered on Maya. Miss, were you on her property at all? No, Maya said quickly. I stayed by the table. It's park property. I checked the signs. She pointed to a faded marker a few yards away. Susan scoffed. She's too close. I can hear that tapping from my porch. It's my right to peace and quiet. The crowd around them grew. Parents clutching toddlers, a few teens on bikes, all watching with hushed curiosity. A woman in a sundress muttered to her husband, "She's just a kid." A boy on a skateboard smirked, filming with his phone. Maya felt their eyes pressing in, judging her every word. The shorter officer sighed. Look, miss, he said to Maya, if you're upsetting people, maybe you should take it somewhere else. But I wasn't, Maya started, then stopped. Her hands shook slightly as she tucked her phone into her pocket. She wanted to argue, to tell them Susan was wrong, but the weight of their stares held her back. She'd been taught to stay calm, to not give anyone a reason to twist her words. Her dad's voice echoed in her mind. Don't let them rattle you, Maya. You're enough. Susan smirked, sensing victory. See? She knows she's out of line. I told you she doesn't belong here. Maya clenched her jaw. She didn't belong? She'd show Susan she was wrong, but not yet. She just needed her dad to get here first. The Charlotte Park simmered under the afternoon sun as Maya Jackson stood by the picnic table, her hands stuffed into her shorts pockets. The two police officers flanked her, their faces a mix of duty and unease. Susan Miller paced a few steps away, her coffee mug now set on the grass, her arms crossed as she glared at Maya. The crowd had swelled, parents, kids, a jogger pausing mid-run, all forming a loose circle around the scene, their whispers buzzing like flies. A teenage boy on a skateboard kept filming, his phone angled for the best shot. Susan's voice rose again, cutting through the murmurs. She's been at it for hours, she said, pointing at Maya. Tapping, banging, whatever you call it. I can't even enjoy my own porch. I want her out of here. The taller officer, the one with the buzz cut, turned to Maya. You heard her, he said, his tone firm but not harsh. If you're causing a disturbance, you need to move along. Maya's stomach twisted. I wasn't banging anything, she said, pulling her phone out to show them. It's just my fingers on the table. Look, no sounds even coming out. Susan rolled her eyes. Oh, don't play innocent. I heard it from my house. She's lying to you. She turned to the officers, her voice sharper. I pay taxes for this park to be peaceful, not for some kid to turn it into a drum set. The shorter officer scratched his mustache, glancing at his partner. Ma'am, he said to Susan, we'll handle it, but we need to figure out what's what. He looked at Maya. You got anything else to say? Maya took a breath, her dark eyes flicking to the crowd. I was practicing for a school thing, she said. I didn't mean to upset anyone. I'll stop if it's a problem, but I wasn't hurting anybody. Susan snorted. Practicing? Sure, that's what they all say. Next thing you know, she'll be back tomorrow with a whole band. She stepped closer, her finger jabbing the air. I don't feel safe with her hanging around here. End of story. The taller officer frowned. Safe? He repeated, looking at Maya's slight frame, her faded tank top, her nervous hands. She's just a kid. Exactly, Susan shot back. Kids like her don't respect rules. I've seen it. Noise today, trouble tomorrow. The crowd stirred. A woman in yoga pants whispered to her friend, She's overreacting. A man with a stroller muttered, It's a park, not a library. But no one spoke up loud enough to stop it. The boy with the skateboard zoomed in, narrating under his breath, This lady's losing it. The shorter officer sighed, clearly torn. Look, he said to Maya, we don't want trouble, but if she's complaining, we've got to do something. You might need to come with us to sort this out. Maya's heart sank. Sort what out? She asked, her voice rising slightly. I didn't break any laws. Susan smirked, folding her arms again. See? She's arguing now. I told you she's trouble. The taller officer held up a hand. Let's not escalate this, he said, but his tone suggested he was leaning toward Susan. Miss, grab your stuff. We'll figure it out at the station. Maya's eyes widened. The station? She said. Can I at least call my dad first? Susan laughed, a short, bitter sound. Oh, sure, call Daddy. Like that'll change anything. The officers nodded reluctantly. Go ahead, the shorter one said. Make it quick. Maya pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling as she dialed. The crowd watched, some shaking their heads, others filming. Susan stood smugly, certain she'd won. She had no idea who was about to pick up on the other end, or what was coming her way. The Charlotte Park pulsed with tension as Maya Jackson stood by the picnic table, her phone pressed to her ear. The two police officers waited a few feet away, their hands resting on their belts, while Susan Miller hovered nearby, her arms crossed and her smirk firmly in place. The crowd of onlookers, parents, kids, and teens murmured among themselves, phones out, capturing every second. Maya's voice was low as she spoke into the phone. Dad, I'm at the park. Someone called the cops on me. I didn't do anything, I swear. On the other end, Daniel Jackson's jaw tightened. He'd been finishing a call with his aide in his home office, a stack of Senate briefing papers on his desk, when Maya's name lit up his screen. Her shaky tone told him everything he needed to know. Stay calm, Maya, he said, already grabbing his keys. I'm coming now. He hung up, made 2 quick calls, and within minutes, he was out the door. Back at the park, Susan tapped her foot impatiently. Are we done yet? She said to the officers. She's stalling. Just take her already. The taller officer glanced at Maya. Wrap it up, miss, he said. We need to move. Maya slipped her phone into her pocket, her heart racing. He's on his way, she said quietly, more to herself than anyone else. Susan laughed. Oh great, Daddy's coming to save her. This ought to be good. Before the officers could respond, a low rumble cut through the air. Heads turned as a sleek black SUV rolled into the park's parking lot, followed by two more. The vehicles moved with purpose, their tinted windows gleaming in the sunlight. Dust kicked up as they stopped, and the crowd fell silent, eyes wide with curiosity. Susan's smirk faltered, her coffee mug forgotten on the grass. "What's this?" she muttered, stepping back. The lead SUV's door swung open, and out stepped Daniel Jackson. At 48, he carried himself with the quiet authority of a man who'd faced tougher rooms than this. He wore a simple polo shirt and slacks, his weekend look, but his broad shoulders and steady gaze screamed power. Behind him, 3 aides climbed out of the other vehicles. Sarah Brooks, his chief of staff, Tom Evans, his security lead, and Rachel Kim, his press assistant. They stayed a few steps back, their casual clothes hiding their roles, but their sharp eyes scanned the scene. Daniel crossed the grass in long strides, the crowd parting as he approached. The boy with the skateboard zoomed in, whispering, "Whoa, this guy's somebody." A woman in the back gasped, "Is that Senator Jackson?" Maya's face softened with relief. "Dad," she said, stepping toward him. Daniel nodded, his eyes warm for a split second before hardening as he turned to the officers. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice deep and even, cutting through the park like a blade. Susan blinked, her confidence draining. "Who are you?" she said, her tone less sure. The taller officer straightened up. "Sir, we got a call about a disturbance," he said, glancing at Susan. "This lady says your daughter was causing trouble." "Trouble?" Daniel repeated, his gaze shifting to Susan. "My daughter? Explain that." Susan swallowed, her hands fidgeting. She was making noise, tapping on the table, disturbing everyone. I had to call. Someone had to do something. Daniel's eyes narrowed. "I'm Senator Daniel Jackson," he said, pulling his Senate ID from his pocket and flashing it briefly. "And I'd like to know why you think my daughter tapping a table justifies this." Susan's mouth opened, then closed. The crowd hushed, phones still rolling. The officers shifted uncomfortably, and Susan's world tilted. She had no idea who she'd just crossed, and she was about to find out how much it would cost her. The Charlotte Park stood still under the weight of Daniel Jackson's presence. The senator towered by the picnic table, his broad frame casting a shadow over Maya, who clutched her phone tightly. The 2 police officers straightened up, their faces a mix of surprise and deference. Susan Miller, once so bold, shrank back a step, her arms dropping to her sides. The crowd, parents, kids, and that kid with the skateboard, watched in silence, phones still recording, as the air crackled with tension. Daniel's deep voice broke the quiet. "So," he said, locking eyes with Susan, "you called the police on my daughter for tapping a table. Tell me why." Susan's mouth worked soundlessly for a moment, her earlier fire snuffed out. I didn't know who she was," she stammered, her hands twisting together. "She was making noise, bothering me. I live right there." She pointed weakly toward her house across the street. "Noise?" Daniel said, his tone sharp but controlled. "She was practicing a beat for school. That's a crime now?" He turned to the officers. "What's the report here? What evidence do you have?" The taller officer cleared his throat, glancing at his notepad. Senator Jackson, sir," he said. "We got a call about a disturbance. The lady said your daughter was disruptive and rude. We were just trying to sort it out." "Sort it out?" Daniel repeated, his eyes narrowing. "By taking a 15-year-old girl to the station over this?" The shorter officer shifted his weight. "She asked us to remove her, sir. We didn't have much to go on." "But didn't have much to go on?" Daniel cut in, his voice rising just enough to make Susan flinch. You didn't ask questions? You didn't check her side? He gestured to Maya. She's my kid, and she's standing here scared because of assumptions. Susan found her voice, though it trembled. I didn't mean any harm, she said, her face flushing red. She was too loud. I didn't know she was your daughter. I just wanted peace. Daniel turned to her, his gaze steady and piercing. Peace doesn't come from accusing someone without cause, he said. You saw a black girl tapping a table and decided she's a threat. That's not about noise. That's about you. The crowd murmured, a few nodding. The woman in yoga pants whispered, He's right. The skateboard kid zoomed in, muttering, This is gold. Susan's eyes darted around, her confidence crumbling. I'm sorry, she said, barely audible, her head dipping. Louder, Daniel said, his tone unyielding. She deserves to hear it. Susan swallowed hard, her voice cracking. I'm sorry, she said, looking at Maya. I shouldn't have called. I overreacted. Maya met her eyes, her expression calm but firm. Thanks, she said simply, but you still scared me. The taller officer stepped forward. Senator, we'll drop this, he said quickly. No charges, no report, just a misunderstanding. Daniel nodded, but his focus stayed on Susan. A misunderstanding? He said. My daughter's not a punching bag for your bad day. You owe her more than words. He paused, letting it sink in. She's getting a new phone. Your dime. Today. Susan's jaw dropped. A new phone? She sputtered. But you broke hers with your stunt, Daniel said, pointing to the cracked screen in Maya's hand. You fix it. Susan nodded frantically, her hands shaking. Okay, I'll pay. The shorter officer tipped his hat. We're done here, sir, he said. Sorry for the trouble. He motioned to his partner, and they headed back to their car. Susan grabbed her mug, her face burning as the crowd watched her shuffle away. Daniel turned to Maya, his voice softening. You okay, kiddo? Yeah, she said, a small smile breaking through. Thanks, Dad. Susan had lost more than she'd bargained for, and the lesson was just beginning. The Charlotte Park settled back into its usual hum as the police car pulled away, its lights fading into the distance. Susan Miller had disappeared across the street, her coffee mug clutched tightly, her steps quick and unsteady. The crowd lingered for a moment, parents whispering, kids drifting back to the swings, before thinning out, leaving Maya Jackson and her father, Daniel, by the picnic table. The black SUVs idled nearby, Daniel's aides keeping a discreet distance, giving them space. Maya sat on the table's edge, her cracked phone resting beside her, her sketchbook open to a blank page. Daniel stood close, hands in his pockets, his broad frame relaxed now that the storm had passed. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the grass, and a soft breeze rustled the trees overhead. You didn't have to go full senator on her, Maya said, a faint smile tugging at her lips. I could have just walked away. Daniel chuckled, a warm, low sound. Maybe, he said, sitting beside her, but I wasn't letting her bully you over nothing. You held your ground, though. I'm proud of that. Maya shrugged, tracing a finger along the table's weathered wood. I didn't feel like I had a choice, she said. She kept saying I didn't belong. I've heard stuff like that before, but today it was louder. Daniel's smile faded, his brown eyes softening with understanding. I know, he said. And I hate that you have to deal with it. I've been gone too much. DC, votes, meetings. I should have been here more, teaching you how to handle this. Maya shook her head. You've taught me plenty, she said. Like that time you said, don't let them make you small. I remembered that today. I just didn't expect her to call the cops. He nodded, pride flickering in his gaze. You stayed calm when most would have cracked, he said. That's strength, Maya. Not yelling back, not running, just standing there, being you. She looked up at him, her voice quieter. Why didn't you make her pay more? You could have gotten her in real trouble. Daniel leaned back, crossing his arms. Thought about it, he admitted. I could have pushed for a citation, maybe more. But that's not the point. Strength isn't about crushing someone. It's about showing them they're wrong and letting them live with it. She's got a new phone bill and a bruised ego. That's enough for now. Maya tilted her head, processing his words. So she just gets off easy? Not easy, Daniel said, his tone firm. She'll hear those whispers every time she steps outside. People saw what she did, her neighbors, her friends. That's a weight she'll carry. You didn't need her punished to win today. You won by not letting her break you. Maya nodded slowly, her fingers tapping a soft rhythm on the table. I just wanted her to see me, she said. Not some troublemaker she made up in her head. She saw you, Daniel said, resting a hand on her shoulder. And so did I. You're tougher than I was at your age, kiddo. But, from now on, no more solo fights, okay? I'm sticking around. Weekends, talent shows, all of it. Maya's smile widened. Even if I make you listen to my beats. Especially then, he said, grinning. But I'm picking the ice cream flavors after. She laughed, the sound light and free, cutting through the lingering tension. Deal, she said, leaning into his shoulder. The park stretched out around them, peaceful again, but different. Susan's outburst had shaken something loose. And this moment, father and daughter, side by side, tightened a bond that distance had strained. Maya knew she could face anything with him in her corner, and Daniel knew he'd never let her face it alone again. 6 months had passed since the showdown at the Charlotte Park, and the North Carolina summer had cooled into a crisp December chill. Maya Jackson sat on the front steps of her house, her new phone, a sleek model Susan Miller had reluctantly paid for, playing a finished beat through her earbuds. At 16 now, she'd grown a little taller, her curly hair spilling loose over a thick sweater. Her sketchbook lay open beside her, filled with lyrics and rhythms for the talent show she'd won back in October. The crowd had cheered her name, and Daniel had been there, front row, clapping louder than anyone. Life had shifted since that chaotic Saturday. Daniel kept his promise, no more long absences. He'd cut back on late-night Senate sessions, delegating more to his aides, Sarah, Tom, and Rachel. Weekends became theirs. Park picnics, ice cream runs, even a trip to the Charlotte Music Festival where Maya got to meet a local DJ. At home, he'd swapped burnt toast for decent pancakes, and Maya teased him mercilessly about it. You're getting soft, Dad, she'd say, and he'd laugh, tossing a dish towel at her. For the first time in years, their small house felt like a real home, not just a stop between his trips. That afternoon, Daniel stepped outside, a mug of coffee in hand, his Senate jacket traded for a flannel shirt. He'd just finished a call with his team, but his phone stayed quiet. No emergencies today. New beat? He asked, nodding at her earbuds. Maya grinned, pulling one out. Yeah, for the spring show, she said. No tapping tables this time. Learned my lesson. He chuckled, sitting beside her. Good call. Less drama that way. Across the street, Susan Miller's life had taken a quieter turn. The park incident hadn't faded easily. Clips of angry park lady racked up views online, shared by that skateboard kid and others. Neighbors whispered when she walked by, her once frequent porch coffee chats replaced by quick waves and closed blinds. Her husband, Greg, a local contractor, had called Daniel a week later, his voice tight. "Senator, I'm sorry about Susan. She's working on it." Daniel had kept it short. "Make sure she does." Susan hadn't returned to the park much since. She'd paid for Maya's phone, $300 wired with a curt note, and kept her distance. Her daughter Emily started volunteering at the library, a subtle shift Susan didn't fight. Whether it was shame or a slow awakening, no one could say. But the sting of that day lingered in her every step. For Maya, the real change was bigger than a new phone. She'd found her voice, literally. At school, she spoke up in class, joined the music club, and even led a workshop on beats for younger kids. Daniel was there for it all. Talent shows, parent nights, quiet evenings when she played him her latest tracks. She'd gotten into a summer music program in Raleigh, and he'd framed the acceptance letter above their fireplace. "That's my girl," he'd said, his voice thick with pride. Back on the steps, Maya closed her sketchbook. "Christmas is gonna be chill this time, right?" she asked, half teasing. "No park crazies?" Daniel grinned, sipping his coffee. "No crazies," he said. "Just us. Tree, lights, your terrible singing." "Hey!" she laughed, nudging him. "You love it." "I do," he said, his tone softening. "Always will." As the sun dipped low, painting the sky orange, they headed inside, the porch light flickering on. Susan's tantrum had sparked something, a stronger bond, a louder Maya, a humbled neighbor. It wasn't just a bad day turned good, it was a new start. For Daniel, it was a wake-up call to stay close. For Maya, it was proof she belonged. And for their corner of Charlotte, it was a small step towards something better. One beat, one family, one day at a time.